So let me ask you a question. What do you think about all the coverage from ABC, NBC, CBS involving RussiaGate and all the things that's happening from the Justice Department and all the things that are going on with Pam Bondi and things happening all over the Washington, D.C.? What do you think about all that coverage? What? You haven't seen any coverage? The only coverage you've seen is Epstein? You mean that's the only thing ABC, NBC, and CBS and MSNBC and CNN, that's the only thing they're covering is Epstein and how Trump's involved? You haven't seen anything else on that? Really? Well, maybe there's a reason. Maybe there's a particular reason why the local alphabet network don't want to cover any of this thing going on involving RussiaGate because, well, maybe, just maybe, they're complicit. So what do you say we talk about that for a second, see what's going on? Maybe you didn't know what's happening. So let me fill you in. Well, as you know, the situation involving RussiaGate is starting to, well, crumble. And by crumble, I mean that things are happening. Turns out that some FBI burn bags, that stuff was supposed to be burned, were hidden in a room in the FBI. It was found out, and people started going through the communiques, the paperwork, and starting reading this stuff and going, wait a minute, this is stuff we didn't know about. This is stuff that nobody else knew about, but let's keep reading this stuff out of these burn bags. They're starting to learn things. Learn things from the annex, the Durham annex, all the stuff that was going on, and suddenly Pam Bondi says, wait a minute, there's some bad stuff going on out here, and they're starting to release it. Releasing things that were, well, hidden away, that nobody found. So what happens? Well, suddenly the wheels start rolling a little bit. And the big thing is that Pam Bondi appoints a strike force. Now, a strike force is a whole team of lawyers, a whole team of investigators that are used predominantly for organized crime, you know, the mafia, any big time crimes where they need to have a whole lot of people, very good people going to investigate. That's what she did. So now we've got a strike force going and starting to release things, copies of emails and copies of evidence of people doing things and saying things. And suddenly we're starting to find out little parts, a little part here, a little part there. Parts are starting to add up. So Pam Bondi appointed a special prosecutor. Hey, we need to investigate this, take this to a grand jury. And you're saying, well, wait a minute. Can't take it to a grand jury. This is any crime committed by anybody. That was clear back in 2016, 17. Well, you're basically right, except for one thing. There's a thing called conspiracy, the conduct of conspiracy. Now, where is it listed? How about 18 U.S.C. 371? That's the code, 18 U.S.C. 371, and take a look at what it reads. You can read it for yourself. About people getting together to do bad stuff. Well, conspiracy in this case is if people within the government are conspiring to prevent someone else from becoming part of the government, i.e. president, and continuing to do it as time goes on, there's no 5-year statute of limitations on this, none. Doesn't happen. Still keeps going. So that prosecutor that she appointed, would he want to go to a federal grand jury in Washington, D.C.? Probably not. 95% of the people in Washington, D.C. are all Democrats, and getting anything done against a Democrat in D.C. is almost impossible. Now, you could say, well, they could go over to Virginia, but Virginia, well, that's just another Washington suburb, call it what you will. It appears that the prosecutor is going to a grand jury in Florida. Now you're going, what? How do they do that? Mar-a-Lago. 2022, the FBI raided Donald Trump's home in Mar-a-Lago. Why? Said they were looking for classified documents that he wasn't turning back in, they wanted back. Well, turns out that raid garnered about 100 classified documents, and not exactly highly classified, but apparently they were looking for something else. Something else they thought Trump may have to use to go against them if the time was ever right. Or whatever it was, they didn't find it because apparently it was somewhere else. So now things are starting to be found out. But this prosecutor goes down to Florida and can present all the evidence. Here's who did what. Here's what's going on. And it turns out there's a whistleblower. And I'm going to take you back to in 2016 when Donald Trump had just been elected president. Now, this goes back in December. He had been elected, but he wasn't inaugurated yet. Been elected. And because he is now the president, he is entitled to the same presidential daily brief that Barack Obama was getting. Barack's going out, Trump's coming in. He gets the same presidential brief. They both do. So it turns out on the 8th of December, he calls all the people of the NSC and a whole bunch of other people into the conference room of the White House and says, hey, you got this brief coming out tomorrow. And the brief says from all the security agencies, there's 17 of them saying the Russians did not hack, couldn't hack what was going on in the election. Because that was the narrative. The Russians were hacking it. They wanted Trump to win, and they were hacking it. He was an illegally elected president. That was the narrative. Except the security, all the intel people said, That was going to be in the presidential daily brief for the December 9th. Obama says, no. You better go back and check that again. Because something's going on because, well, gee whiz, that's not going to work. The problem was that same information had, in fact, been given to the House of Representatives saying, we don't see anything. There's nothing going on. And then there was also that situation where the Norwegians, the Dutch, if you will, intercepted some Russian stuff and found out the Russians had tapped into the DNC computer and found out a whole bunch of nasty stuff, mostly about Hillary. They said at the U.S., here's the stuff we got. Here's what's going on. And the Russians decided they weren't going to get involved with the election because they figured Hillary was going to win. Everybody figured Hillary was going to win. Russians backed off, said, nothing we can do. We got dirt on her, so when she gets elected, we got dirt to use on her. Well, so all these people were gathered into the presidential briefing, and there was a whole bunch of folks, including James Comey, the Three Stooges, as we call them. That's Clapper, Comey, and they were all called in, and a whole bunch of other folks saying, we got to change that assessment. So after the meeting was over, notes were done. Those notes have been now retrieved as evidence. They now have the notes. But need to change this. Review this and change it. And apparently somebody in that area said, wait a minute, we can't do that. That's not legit. That's not honest. That's not honest. You can't do that. We know what we know. The Russians didn't do that. So apparently the word is that you either do it or your job's in danger. You will not have a job. You'll be thrown out. We'll bury you so far that you won't be able to pick up sand. Well, apparently, this whistleblower went to the IG at the NSA. Didn't get anything there. Went to the IG at the DOJ. Didn't get there. And he also went to the senator who represents him and said, hey, I got something going on here you need to know about. The senator wouldn't even give him the email address so that he can write stuff and say, here's what's going on. Well, that person exists. That person is a potential whistleblower. Said, here's what happened. All right, so all these things are going on, folks. All these things are happening. And you're saying, okay, now there's going to be warrants. They're going to be coming up next week. No, they're not. Yeah. See, the problem is they have to go through and cull through all the paperwork, start questioning everybody at the lowest level, person who wrote this document, person who did this, person who did that, and call them in. What did you know? Why did you write this? What did you do? You get that information, lowest level. And you get that information, then you find out the next person who was involved with that document, because documents go through a lot of levels. Okay, who was the next person above you who did this? Well, we contact that person. We talk to that person. From what we learned from the lowest person, we start asking the person above that. Then we keep going up the ladder of people who are assembling the documents. Till finally we have enough evidence to say, now we're going after the people that said this. Now we've got something to investigate on. You turn that over to the grand jury. There's the information there. And if the grand jury ends up being in Florida, it could be a very interesting case. Now, on conspiracy, like I said, since the 18 U.S.C. 371 is conspiracy, we're talking not the 5 years. This keeps going because it's been continuing to keep going on. We know that. So what's going to happen? Well, you're saying, well, they can't bring charges against Obama. Well, conspiracy is a different animal. And he could say, hey, I'm president. Supreme Court says I can do things under my job. I'm going to take that tact. I'm going to say I can do this stuff because I'm president. I had the security changed, and I did that. Fight me on it. Okay, you can do that. Say you're president, you got immunity. Or else you could say, hey, I asked my security people, I said, I've been seeing all this stuff on TV and radio and all the media saying, hey, Russians were doing this, but you're telling me that it wasn't? Well, it's two different stories here. I need you to go back and make dead sure that what the media is saying. Really? So they go back and say, okay, here, we write a new one. And that one, because the December 8th PDB was not released to Trump. It was rewritten. So where do we stand? I'll tell you where we stand. We stand that right now it's going to take a while to get all this done. If you expect indictments to be done in a month, it's not going to. It could be 6 months. It could be next year. They got a lot of evidence to garner, a lot of people to talk to, but build a case. And yes, the grand jury then can be brought in and see what happens. But right now, so you know, that maybe, just maybe, if Obama decides to turn on the Three Stooges, Brendan, Coleman, and Clapper, then they could squeal and say, wait a minute, it wasn't us. Somebody's going to squeal. Somebody's going to say something. Somebody's going to be caught. And somebody's going to say, I'm going to tell you what's going on because I don't want to go to jail. That's the way it works. We shall see what happens. But don't expect anything quickly. It doesn't work that way. They've got to invest everything and have all their chips and all their ducks in a row. And once they present it, then we'll see what happens. But now you know what's going on. And the media's not talking about it because they themselves were complicit in all this, reporting this to you. And now they don't want to talk about it. Because if they do, they are tattling on themselves. And that they can't do, that they're afraid to do, and that could cost them, since they work under the public doctrine, they could be forced to lose their licenses to be able to operate. That could happen because the government controls the media and controls the airways. Something to think about, but it's something you didn't know. But guess what? Now you do. The dirty secret is starting to come along and come out. And eventually, somebody is going to pay, and pay very, very big.